So, what year does World War II end? 1945. Now, if you look at this map, remember how Stalin said he would invade or declare war on Japan 3 months after victory in Europe. Operation August Storm, the Russians will get troops into China and into the Korean Peninsula here. American troops will land in South Korea. Now, this peninsula, the Korean Peninsula, has been controlled by the Japanese since 1903. So when the Japanese lose the war, they got to go home from everywhere that they took control of during the war. Does that make sense? That leaves a vacuum of power in those places. And one of those places is Korea. Now, in 1948, as we go through this, the United States, after the war, is going to occupy Japan, correct? Who's going to be the governor of Japan? General Douglas MacArthur. For the next 5 years, we are going to write the Japanese Constitution for them and govern them and pacify them and rebuild them into something different. Yes? Now, in 1948, there's a civil war in China. Our guy, remember that guy, Chiang Kai-shek? That guy? Our guy is defeated by this guy, Chairman Mao Zedong, who's a communist. See, it's in red. Okay. In 1948. Now, when I was in the communist country of China in 2005 to adopt my lovely daughter, Lily, I bought this little red book. Okay? This is Chairman Mao's little red book. And it's a book of phrases and quotes by Mao, Chairman Mao. Okay? Now, while I was there, I bought 2 of these. One for me, so I could show to my classes. And 2, the second one for the only person in the building at the time that ever fought against communists. Coach Lawbone. So he has a copy. Okay. Now, it's kind of fallen apart after all those years, especially because it was made in China. Okay, so I'll pass this around. All right. There are it's in Chinese and they have English translation as well. Okay, in case any of you want to memorize some of Chairman Mao's most famous quotes. Okay. No, actually, I'll take points off you. For learning those. Yeah. I'm kidding.
Are you against learning? It's important to know your enemy.
Good call.
I know.
Can you trust this guy? Can you trust Stalin? You know your enemy. Okay. He's a communist dictator. You can't trust him. We learned that, Grace, in the 20th century. Okay. Now, okay. So, guys, Russia, which borders Korea, just this little part right here. The rest of the border with Korea is China. But this little part right here is Russia. Russia's going to get troops into the north before the war's over. We got troops down here. Okay. Now, what we were really concerned about after 1948 was what's called the domino theory. Okay, you guys ever set up dominoes and like in a line and then knock them down? You've seen that done. You've seen it done. Okay. We are worried that as China falls to communism, there's going to be a domino effect of other countries falling to communism. Okay, so tick. And guys, you know, this is Vietnam down here. We'll be talking about this tomorrow. Okay, Vietnam. So it's down here. We're worried about the spread of communism. So Americans' foreign policy is going to become this: containment. To contain communism where it is and not allow it to spread. We've already lost Eastern Europe. to Stalin. You know what I mean? He took over all those countries and controlled them. So we're worried about this. Now, they were supposed to have an election between the South and the North to unify the country. Well, the date for that election came and went. See, the guy that the Russians left in charge was Kim Il-sung. I showed you a picture of him yesterday. This is the grandfather of Kim Jong-un. Okay. The guy that came to power in the South is Syngman Rhee. Now, Rhee, who's a Korean, was imprisoned by the Japanese when the Japanese took over Korea. He escaped, came to the United States, and was educated at Ivy League schools in the United States. So when the war was over, he went back to Korea and ran for president down there. But it was only president of the South. We were worried that Syngman Rhee would try to attack the North and unify the country. So we didn't leave him a bunch of weapons, tanks, artillery. Stalin is going to leave Kim Il-sung with artillery, tanks, even aircraft. Okay? Now, our containment policy means that we're going to try and stop it from spreading anywhere else. The Undersecretary of State at the time, under Truman, was a guy named Dean Acheson. He gave this big speech, okay, about how we're going to stop the spread of communism. We're not going to allow it to happen in Vietnam. We're not going to let it happen in Taiwan, because this is where Chiang Kai-shek fled. This is where he fled after he was defeated by Mao, to Taiwan, okay? It's an island off the coast. Okay. Off the coast of China, right here. So my map over there is not perfect, okay? This is Taiwan. So when Chiang was defeated, him and his wife and a lot of his military fled to Taiwan. We decided that we were going to protect Taiwan and Vietnam from communism. Dean Acheson gave this speech, and he forgot to mention South Korea. So when Kim heard this speech, he's like, maybe the United States isn't going to defend South Korea. He went to Stalin. This is 1950. He went to Stalin and he said, listen, did you hear the speech? Stalin's like, yeah, I heard it. He said, can I have a green light to go and take the South? Stalin said, yeah, we'll help you. We'll give you what you need. He gave him the green light. So on June 25th, 1950, Truman, who's asleep in the White House, gets woken up. North Korea had invaded South Korea. Now, they had a well-trained army. They had about 60,000 well-trained. They had tanks, artillery. They come across, okay? Now, the capital of the North is Pyongyang. The capital of the South is Seoul. Seoul hosted the Olympics, I don't know, 20 years ago, okay? The South Koreans are not ready for this. They're not prepared. Now, they're going to take the capital. Now, Truman is like shocked and angry. Now, there's this new international organization that is supposed to keep the peace. What's the name of that organization? The United Nations. So Truman goes to the United Nations. Now, these are the big four that are on the UN Security Council. These four countries can veto anything that 200 countries in the UN say, we want to do this. Any of these four can veto it. That's the only way we join. You guys with me? So the Soviet Union, Truman goes to the UN and he says, hey, we need to stop this. Could the Soviet Union veto that? Yeah, but see, the thing was, when China fell to communism, Soviet Union demanded that China be put on the UN Security Council. You know what the other three said? No. So in 1950, when this happened, Russia was boycotting the United Nations. So Truman goes to the United Nations and says, this needs to stop. And they're like, yeah, this needs to stop. So the Korean War, guys, there's no war declared. There's no treaty that ends it. It's a conflict, or what some people called at the time a police action. So the United Nations, there's going to be 17 countries that will send troops, okay, to stop this incursion of the South. Now, does the United States have any troops in the region in 1950? Where? In Japan and the Philippines. Our Navy's down there. Okay? Now, are those the troops that are in Japan? Are these the same troops that with MacArthur island hopped across the Pacific and defeated the Japanese? You know, those badass dudes? No, those guys are all back home taking advantage of the GI Bill of Rights. They've gotten married, they're going to college, they're starting businesses. These guys are green. And by 1950, guys, 5 years after the war, Japan has been pacified. Like, there's no problems. They're just hanging around, drinking sake and getting suntans. And the Cold War turns hot. And MacArthur's like, hey, pack your bags, boys. We're going to Korea. What? Did I sign up for this? We're going where? Going to Korea. So almost immediately, we start sending supplies over. Now, the South Koreans are getting their butts kicked. And they're pushed all the way back to what becomes known as the Pusan perimeter. So we start sending in supplies, okay, men, to secure this perimeter, all right? So, all right, what's the plan? Guys, on the last test, I had a question. Sonar and radar. Remember that? Now, I haven't handed the test back, okay? But not many of you got 3 out of 3 on that one. Everybody got at least 2 out of 3. Okay. What I was looking for, tell me, raise your hand if you had this. A couple of you did. Sonar allowed us to find German submarines, right? Take them out. So we could open up what? Our supply lines. A free flow of supplies across the Atlantic. If we don't have supply lines, guys, we don't win. The other thing radar really helped with was achieving air superiority over the skies of Europe, which I told you several times was of great importance in World War II. Yes? As I did with supply lines. Yes? I would even take this. Radar helped Britain survive. And at least one student in my 4 history classes wrote this. Because Britain was able to survive, we had a launching pad to liberate Europe. And radar was the major reason for Britain surviving. I would have accepted that as well, which is a very good point if you came up with that point. Yes, sir. Okay, so MacArthur has a plan. He wants to cut the North Korean supply lines. Now, this is risky. He wants to flank the enemy and do an amphibious invasion at Incheon, okay, and cut off their supply lines. Now, the 80th Congress, that Republican Congress we've been talking about, they created the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which we still have today that advise the president on military matters. MacArthur takes this plan to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and they're like, General, this is too risky. This isn't going to work. We don't think you should try this. You should just build up here and break out. He's like, no. Listen, I can do this. If it goes wrong, you can blame me and fire me. So they relent. Now, if there's one guy on planet Earth in 1950 that knows how to run an amphibious invasion in the South Pacific, it's who? It's General MacArthur. He did it all over the Pacific. So, gets his way. We're going to land. We're going to flank the enemy, get those flat bottom boats back out. Okay? And we're going to land at Incheon. See, here's the thing. Korea took Seoul, the capital. The North Koreans took it. But they didn't heavily defend this area. They were busy down here. Okay? So there were some barrier islands. Now, any of you guys that have ever been to Cheney Lake or El Dorado Lake, when you walk out into that lake, even Lake Afton, what are you walking into? What is on the bottom of the lake there? It's nasty. It's muck. You know what I'm talking about? That muck in between your toes? Disgusting. And that means a lot to me because I grew up on the Gulf Coast of Florida. And so when you walk out into the water there, you're walking into sand. And it's nice. And you can see your feet. Not here. It's nasty. Well, guys, Incheon is a big bay and it's muck. We go in at low tide and our guys are walking in mud, dude. Just muck. Okay. My dad has a house in Florida on the bay. Okay. You can walk out 100 yards into that bay. It's about right here. Okay. It's very shallow. A lot of bays are like that. Okay. So that was like Incheon. But there were some barrier islands that we had to deal with some North Koreans on. We took care of that. And we landed in Incheon and boom. MacArthur cuts across, cut their supply line. Brilliant. Circle down, capture and kill a bunch of North Koreans. There are some North Koreans that do flee and get out, but not very many. It's brilliant. Guys, it's August. It's over. The mission was to remove the North from the South. They did it in 2 months. Korean War's over. Congrats. Nice job. Well, this is what you call mission creep. The mission was to remove the North from the South. Now the mission's going to change. Truman's like, holy cow, that was easy. Arthur's badass, really. Like, wow. I got an idea. Let's go back to the UN and ask, hey, is it okay if we just go ahead and unify the whole country? Invade the North and take it over? And who's not there to veto that? Russia's not there to veto. And the United Nations says, sure, go ahead, liberate the North. Now this guy over here, Mao, says, listen, if you guys cross this 38th parallel that divides the North and South, we're going to get involved. The Chinese. That's funny. The Japanese kicked the crap out of the Chinese. We kicked the crap out of the Japanese. Chinese aren't a threat. They're not going to take on the United States of America. All right. So we ignore that. We're going. And guys, guess what we're doing? I mean, like, boom, here we go. Mission has changed. Going north, okay? Now, if you look at the Earth, the satellite photo, you'll notice something. The South is very green. It's flat. It's a lot of agriculture, a lot of food. Go north of that 38th parallel, it looks more like the desert or rocks, and then mountains up here. Okay? So by Thanksgiving, American lines look like this. We're in the mountains of North Korea. By Thanksgiving, MacArthur says, things are going so well, we'll be home by Christmas. That's what he told us. That's what he told the world. But then our troops at the front in the mountains started to see a different uniform. Actually, a little bit taller soldier as well. Just a few of them here and there. Who are they? They're Chinese troops. And they're scouting our positions in the mountains. Now, did I mention we're in the mountains in November and December? It's cold. Like I said, these guys were getting suntans back here in June. Now they're in the mountains of North Korea, and it's freaking cold. Okay? See, the Chinese have put together, now, listen, they're not really ready for this, but they got lots of people. They've got a volunteer army of 1 million volunteers. Now, remember when I showed you that clip from Stalingrad where they gave the Russian soldiers, one guy got a rifle and another guy got a clip of bullets? Remember that scene? Chinese are in a similar situation. They don't have enough weapons, and actually some of their soldiers don't even have shoes. But they got a lot of them. Now, the Yalu River, which separates China and North Korea, there are bridges, lots of bridges that come across, okay? So, the Chinese have scouted our positions, and here they come. Now, the Army is over here. Marines are over here. This is a big reservoir called the Chosin Reservoir, okay? So we're up in the mountains, and all of a sudden, the bugle blows. The horn. They blow a bugle, the Chinese do, and they start coming in waves. We're talking about tens of thousands coming in waves. And guys, I'm telling you, we are going to mow them down. But then you're going to start to run out of ammunition because you're killing so many Chinese. And I'm telling you guys, like, the bodies are stacking up. We just watched, you guys seen that movie 300? This is Sparta, that movie. Remember how they stacked the bodies? Guys, literally, they're climbing over the dead bodies and we're mowing them down. They just keep coming. And they surround us. Okay? Our guys are outmanned and overwhelmed. The Army is going to fall back to here. The Marines are going to fall back to here. They're completely surrounded. It's the dead of winter. So when bodies fall, when guys fall, whatever position they fall in, their bodies freeze like that. So you start moving bodies, the bodies are frozen, limbs start snapping and stuff like that. Okay, there's some really good documentaries on this, guys. One called The Frozen Chosen, the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir. Our guys are literally going to have to fight their way out to retreat. Okay, and they will, valiantly. We're going to lose a lot of guys here. The Chinese are going to lose a lot more. They're going to fight their way out to the coast here, okay, where we will try and save as many of them as we can, okay? So the veterans of the Chosin Reservoir campaign in North Korea have seen some of the heaviest fighting that American troops have ever seen. Some of the worst battles we've ever seen, okay? And when you see those guys interviewed, and, you know, they don't have fingers because of the frostbite, okay, guys that were shot. I mean, a lot of guys won, like, medals of honor, like, just bravery and stuff they did. There were quite a few Congressional Medals of Honor handed out during the Korean War. The troops that were down, not up in the mountains, they're going to retreat back south. The Chinese are going to push us all the way back down south of Seoul. This is by February. So all of this has happened in 6 months or so. Up, or just, you know, take this, then up there and back down in 6 months. Okay? Truman is pissed. MacArthur's pissed. MacArthur asked Truman, he says, look, look, we got to cut the Chinese supply lines. I need to be able to bomb in China. In fact, give me a couple of nukes and send me some more men, and I'll get with Chiang Kai-shek's army here in Taiwan, and we'll just take care of the communists right now in China. That's what MacArthur says. That's what he wants. Truman and his Secretary of Defense, Marshall says, hold up. Be the wrong war with the wrong enemy at the wrong time. We don't want to fight the Chinese right now because if Russia gets involved, they got the atomic bomb now, and we're going to have a major war. So here's a new term in American military lexicon. We've been using it ever since. It's called a limited war. MacArthur is asked to fight this war with one hand tied behind his back, unable to cut the Chinese supply lines. You can't win. So MacArthur, upset with Truman, goes public. He goes to the newspapers. He says, Truman's not letting me win this war. You know what that's called? That's called insubordination. You don't criticize the commander-in-chief. Just ask General Stanley McChrystal, who was in charge in Afghanistan, who gave an interview to Rolling Stone magazine, which is one of the most anti-war publications on the planet. He gives an interview to Rolling Stone. You don't think they're going to try and sabotage this general? Oh, they do. So they ask him about the rules engagement that our soldiers are using in Afghanistan. And yes, they're fighting with one hand tied behind their back. They're not allowed to do night searches. Only women soldiers can search women in Afghanistan. You cannot engage somebody unless they engage you. You're fighting a war with one hand tied behind your back. And McChrystal complained about it and criticized the commander-in-chief. That was Obama at the time. The next day after that article came out, General Stanley McChrystal was packing his bags, headed back to the States. He had been relieved of his duties. Now, when Truman fires MacArthur, McChrystal is no MacArthur. Remember who MacArthur's father was. Admiral Arthur MacArthur, hero of the Spanish-American War. MacArthur, hero of World War II. I shall return, and does. He's on the cover of every magazine in America and every newspaper in America. Everybody loves MacArthur. They want him to run for president. And Truman fires him. My dad never forgave Truman for that. A lot of Americans never forgave Truman for that. But if I were to write an article in the Wichita Eagle today that criticized Mrs. Harshberger and Mrs. Nielsen on how they run Bishop Carroll Catholic High School, what would they do to me? I would be fired, and rightly so. Yes? Insubordination. Truman had no choice. He had to fire MacArthur. So he puts General Westmoreland in charge. The next 2.5 years, guys, we're going to be fighting against the North Koreans and the Chinese to take back Seoul and get back to the 38th parallel. Eisenhower runs for president in 1952. I'm going to end this conflict. He brings out the big stick and says, we will nuke you if you don't come to the peace table. In July of 1953, we get an armistice, a ceasefire. That ceasefire has been in place for the last 70 years. It's 2023, 1953, 70 years. We have had between 10 and 25,000 American troops on that border ever since, for the last 70 years. Okay? There's been no formal peace agreement to end the conflict, just a ceasefire. And it's held. Now, there's been some skirmishes at that border over the years, okay? People have died, but no major engagements. Now, President Trump, when he was president, he did something no other president had done. He went there. He went to the 38th parallel, and he met with the crazy little man. Okay? He said, listen, little man, we're not going to invade you. You just need to pipe down and quit being such a jerk. We'll leave you alone. And in fact, if you get rid of your nukes, we may even choose to open up trade with you so you can maybe feed your people. He ain't getting rid of his nukes. But he pipes down a little bit, you know. So, this war has the nickname the Forgotten War. It's the last war in black and white. You know what I mean by that? So if you see film about Korea, it's in black and white. The TV coverage of it was in black and white. Remember all those war dates I asked you to memorize for bonus points on the test? Now, the vast majority of those wars we won up until Korea. Now, the War of 1812 could be considered a draw because it ended where it began. The Korean War could be seen as a draw because it ended where it began, at the 38th parallel. Okay? We didn't win, but we didn't lose. And you know who didn't lose? Were the people of South Korea. For the last 70 years, they have been a democratic nation, capitalist system. They have done very well for themselves. Korea is a beautiful place. They love Americans. It's a great place to vacation. Okay, Seoul's a beautiful city, all within striking range of North Korean artillery. Okay, now, but they're free and thriving. They're one of our best friends in the world. Remember when I showed you pictures of the American cemetery in France and Italy? Well, there's American cemeteries in South Korea. School children, elementary school children, do service projects to clean and mow the grass and the upkeep of the American cemetery in South Korea. Okay, they revere the Americans that bled and died for their freedom. So in that sense, you can't say we lost. Okay, we won for them. We did stop the spread of communism in Korea. Okay. Now, here's something different. In World War II, there's a chance that when you went to Europe or North Africa, you didn't come home for 4 years. You might have got like 2 weeks leave or something like some R&R, something like that. But most of the guys that went in stayed in. By 1950, guys, we do what are called tours of duty. So how long is a tour of duty? Usually 12 months. That's what my father did. He was there for 12 months. And then he rotated out, and new guys rotated in. This is what we've done in Afghanistan and Iraq. So if you talk to veterans of those wars, you could ask them, how many tours did you do? Okay. Now, they don't generally make you do more than 2 or so. But some, that's all they know. Like, this is their life. They're a warrior. So some went 5, 6 tours. Okay. And then the body, the mind, you know. But guys would go back, and go back. But they didn't have to. Okay. So, guys, when the war was over in Korea, it wasn't like all of our boys just came home and there were parades. There was no celebration. We didn't win. And people just wanted to forget it. And we did. And a lot of the lessons that we learned in this conflict, we forgot. That could have been used 10, 12 years later in a place called Vietnam. A lot of the brass, they left the military. They got out. There was no honor in the war. We just want to forget about it. Okay? Close to 50,000 Americans would die in Korea. Almost half from disease and exposure. Okay? About 32,000 from combat. Another close to 18,000 from the elements. Okay. Now, for my dad's part, he was a Marine. He was a Marine pilot. So he was based in Osaka, Japan, and he would fly in supplies. My dad actually flew into Pyongyang, the North Korean capital. If he were still alive, my dad would be one of the few people on this planet that's not from North Korea that's ever been in North Korea. Very few people have that are not North Korean. And generally flying in supplies and generally flying out body bags of dead American soldiers. My dad was there in 1950 because that's when we were in the North. Okay. Now, my uncle, Tom, was a radio operator. He stayed in the South the whole time. I asked him about the war, and he just said, basically we stayed in camp. We had a lot of South Koreans around us. We had this little South Korean boy that, was he was our runner. He'd go get us stuff and take care of us. We talked a lot about that kid. But more than anything, I learned a lot about this from a veteran from Wichita of the Korean War. His name was Ray Koenig. And Ray Koenig had fought in the Battle of the Bulge in World War II. He'd seen a lot. He stayed in the Army. And so by the time he was in Korea, he was in a Jeep. He was an officer. So he has a driver. He sits shotgun. And then there's a Browning machine gun mounted on the back of the Jeep. And a Wichita Eagle reporter interviewed him and asked him about his time in World War II in Korea. He was actually living in one of these old folks' homes over here. Because one of my students that was doing interviews for my class for honors worked at this place. And I was telling this story about Ray Koenig. And she goes like, I've heard this story before. Because she worked at the place where this guy was living. Okay, it was kind of cool. She knew him. Okay, so Ray Koenig told 3 stories about North Korea where he was most feared for his life. Okay, or feared, just scared. Now, what he said about this Korean War, he said what was hard to watch was the effect on the people, the civilians. All this back and forth right here in the middle of the country. He said it wasn't uncommon to see like women out in a pond somewhere washing their clothes as artillery shells are going off around. Farmers working in the fields as there's a war going on. And, a lot of these roads in Korea are dirt roads. And so if any of you guys have been out in the country, these dirt roads, the ditches. He said there was always bodies in the ditches. Okay. Whether they were civilian or military, there were bodies in the ditches. And so he told 3 stories about riding around in this Jeep. Okay. The first story, they're riding down the road, dirt road in this Jeep. They see this little girl walking down the side of the road, probably 6 years old. And as they get close, she's twirling something in her hand, like this. They get closer and they realize this 6-year-old girl is twirling around a Chinese stick grenade. And they're like, oh my God. So they pull up. She doesn't speak English and she's smiling at him and waving. And they're like, hey, put it down. Put it down. They're yelling at her. And she doesn't know what they're saying. So he's like, I pulled my sidearm. And he pointed it at her. He said, put it down. She dropped it and ran off. It didn't go off. But they wanted her to see what she was playing with. So they took the cap off and threw it into the pond on the side of the road, and boom. So she would know, don't play with they're grenades, okay? But just the thought of seeing that girl just blow up, right in front of them, like scared the crap out. You know what I mean? They didn't, nobody wanted to see that. Another time they're riding around in the Jeep. There's bodies in the ditch, and they see something move. So they stop, they get out. It's easy to tell. Start touching bodies. They're either warm or cold. Okay? There's a little arm in there. It's like a 2-year-old infant laying underneath some bodies, and it's warm. So they pull this, probably laying under their parents, mom or dad or something, They pull this child out. It's trying to play dead. It's shaking. uncontrollably. So they wrap it up, the child up, and drive it back to the base. And as soon as that child heard people talking in Korean, it wanted to go to that child, and so they were able to save that child. But just hard to be a part of that. The last story. They're going down a dirt road, and there's in the Jeep, and there's trees lining the road. They take a left turn, look up, and there's 2 columns of North Korean soldiers marching right at them. Well, they got the Browning machine gun. So he said they pointed that on the right column. And if people they start shooting at them, they take out that whole column with the Browning. But they're going to die if they do that. And the North Koreans know 1/2 of them are going to die if they open up fire on this Jeep. And so that is all being processed in a matter of like 1 second, okay, as you're driving into this 2 columns. And so he just said, hey, just go slow, go slow, go slow, go slow. And they're driving through them, and they're doing this, they're doing this, they're doing this. As soon as they got to the end of those 2 columns, I hit the gas and got the hell out of there. Nobody fired a shot. He said he thought he was about to die, And so did the North Koreans, so we fired. Okay. But that's just that's some stories that from a guy from Wichita that survived the Korean War. These guys that fought up here, like I said, brutal, unbelievable, heroism, and so forth. So we work our way back up, get the ceasefire, and it's over. Okay. So today, it's a sad situation because if you think of all the places on the planet you did not want to be born as a human being, North Korea would be one of those places. If you are in the military in North Korea, you have enough to eat. The rest of the people in North Korea generally do not. They have been cut off from the rest of the world because of their government. China is allied with North Korea. They don't really like the North Koreans. They're not big fans of them. But they don't want the United States or a democratic nation on their border like that. So they're willing to prop up the Kims and keep them in power. Okay. He does have the atomic bomb now. North Korea does. Can they reach the United States with it? Can we shoot it down? Would he do such a thing? I mean, a couple weeks ago, Kim came out and said he had a satellite in space that was spying on the White House. This guy just seeks attention. Okay. So, they're isolated. It'd be great to see that country unified. You obviously have families divided at some point. I mean, it's been 70 years. So these people, the only thing these people know is what the government tells them. They don't have free internet over there. They don't have freedom over there. Everything they're taught is brainwashing. They don't know the truth about the world around them. It's really sad. And there have been some people that have escaped. Okay. And there's a woman in the United States right now that escaped, who's written a book about it. She does speeches about it. I follow her on Twitter. And she tries to warn Americans about communism and, some of the things that are going on in this country that are dangerous, like canceling people for their speech. You shouldn't do that. Okay. Now, if you have a job like I do and you say something that is a fireable offense in my private life, I have to watch what I say. It's my job. Now, if I feel like I'm telling the truth, then I will tell the truth. Okay. But if I do something bad, I can get fired for that. Okay. You've seen this on these college campuses with the whole anti-Israel, anti-Semitic stuff going on college campuses in the last couple of months here. People have the right to say what they want. Okay. But as you guys will find out, the ones of you that go to college, there are repercussions for speech on a college campus. Okay. Did any of you guys watch any of those hearings with the presidents of MIT, Harvard, and Penn? Congress brought them in because there's a lot of anti-Semitism on their campuses, where Jewish students really feel threatened by other students on campus. Now, you tell me, if there was a white student that was saying racist things on a school campus at Harvard, you think there'd be repercussions for the white student? Well, of course there would. But you have these students that are saying these really nasty things about Jewish students, and they're not doing anything. So they called the presidents of those schools before Congress and said, hey, what's up here? What's going on your campuses? And the University of Pennsylvania president resigned this week. And there's a lot of pressure on the Harvard president to resign for what they're allowing on their college campuses to take place. It's anti-Semitism, okay? Still, I believe in free speech, but if you start threatening and bullying people on campus, there's a code of conduct. And you're violating the code of conduct, you need to be expelled from the school and kicked out. But they're not doing that. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. But guys, today, Russia and China are on the UN Security Council. Okay, China got on there eventually. Okay, and yes, any of these five can veto anything in the UN. Okay, so UN, like I said the other day, guys, doesn't really have any backbone. They don't have a military. Anything they do, they can't really back up or enforce. Okay, they don't have the authority to, all right, or the power to. But this was there were 17 countries. Okay, so I mentioned the Ethiopians the other day. Okay, so one of the interviews one of my students interviewed a Korean War vet, and he said his base camp was right next to the Ethiopian base camp. There was over 1,200 Ethiopians. And so when the Ethiopians would go out and fight against the Chinese and North Koreans, and that's in this region here, when they would kill a North Korean or Chinese, they would cut their heads off. And they would put them on pikes around their base camp. And he said, like, none of the other troops, like the Americans or other troops, like, messed with the Ethiopians. He said, like, these guys were like, they were serious warriors. I mean, like, they went out, killed, did their job, come back, put the heads on. Crazy. France sent fewer men than Ethiopia. Turkey sent 5,400. France sent like 1,100. The British sent 14,000. We sent 300,000. Okay, so this is the theme from here on out, right? After World War II, who is the country to try and keep the world order? The world order, the United States, okay? And we've been doing this for 70 years. We've been kind of the police force, okay? If we don't do it, who's going to do it? France? China? And do you want China doing it? Who's going to be a better force for good on the planet? The United States or China? And that's pretty easy, Now, unless you're Chinese, you might be saying, well, of course, China, we need to be the one. Okay? So that's come at great cost of blood and treasure for the United States. But is the world a better place because of it? We tried to stop the spread of communism. We're going to try again tomorrow in a place called Vietnam. So I'll be talking about that tomorrow. Okay? And then Friday, I'm going to talk about civil rights. Monday, we're going to do a review. It'll be a good review. Okay? I'll give you back your review sheets. I kept them for you. Okay? And I'll do a really good review for you for the final. Okay? On Monday, the day before the final. Okay? So have your, I don't know, drink some caffeine or something for you guys that have trouble staying awake. Okay? The final is not a piece of cake. It's cumulative. It's about 90 questions. It's all multiple choice matching, fill in the blank, true and false. There's a listing. The last 8 questions are listing. I'm going to have you list the presidents of the United States after Eisenhower. Okay, so you're going to give me JFK, LBJ, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump. Okay. That'll be the last, like, 9 questions on the test. All you need is a last name or a 3-letter acronym.
Just the one we take home.
Oh, I'm gonna give you something on Friday to take home too, which will help you with the final. Yes,
The president's after.
Eisenhower.
Eisenhower.
Yeah. I'll put them all up on the board on Monday. Okay, you can write them down.
Do we take yours Tuesday or Wednesday?
Tuesday, yeah. 1 through 4. And I got 1 on
The
Tuesday.
next.
Okay? Guys, there's Korean War. All right?